Good evening, MSAD75. The March 23rd meeting of the Finance Committee will now come to order. We have a pretty straightforward agenda tonight. We're going to start with an exciting thing. We're getting our audit presentation tonight, everybody. Something to celebrate, truly. No sarcasm. So, Evan, I'll let you take it from there.
All right, thank you very much. So this evening we have Heather Hunter joining us from RHR Smith, which is the auditing firm that we have enlisted to help us out with the 2024 audit. We have an audit presentation. I don't know, Heather, if you want to share your screen to have the presentation up there, or I can do it, either one.
I can try sharing it.
Excellent.
It's a pleasure to have you, Heather. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much for coming to do this. And I guess without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'm Heather Hunter. I'm the audit director from RHR Smith & Company, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight to share this information with you. And hopefully, let's see. Is everybody able to see the presentation? Yes. Okay, great. So this is the FY 2024 financial statement presentation. So I'll be kind of running down through. Here's the order of items I will be covering tonight. Feel free to jump in and ask any questions, or I'll be happy to address any questions at the conclusion of the presentation.
Excellent.
So the first kind of rules of engagement we kind of cover when we look at is how we approach the office audit. And there are certain client responsibilities that we kind of highlight, as well as our responsibilities. So the governance understands who is responsible for what task when we are undertaking an audit. So looking at your side of the house first, it is your responsibility not only to determine those controls and set the controls in place to make sure they're properly working, but also look at utilizing your software as it is intended, complying with local laws, regulations, and accounting standards. For this particular unit, you have two accounting bodies that we tend to follow. One is GASB, the Generally Accepted Accounting Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and GAAP is the Generally Accepted Accounting Principles that we use to prepare your financial information. We also look at understanding any estimates you may use and the rationale for those estimates when we're reviewing financial statements. We look at all of the information that you need to provide to us, including all reconciliations, any trial balances, all the supporting documents, and any journal entries that you're making that may impact those financial statements. And the last piece that we look at is understanding your role and responsibilities in accepting grants. From our side of the house, we look at your internal control environment to understand it. We do not render an opinion on your control environment, but if something comes to our attention, we are able to offer suggestions for improvements to strengthen your internal controls. We may propose journal entries to remedy any material misstatements. We audit those financial statements in relation to GASB, GAAP, as well as in accordance with the AICPA standards, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. We'd evaluate any assumptions that are made and how they impact any estimates that are made for reasonableness. We resolve and discuss any kind of disagreements with accounting practices that are out there. And I'm happy to say there were no disagreements. And then lastly, we look at preparing your draft financial reports, footnotes, and any supplementary information, as well as your compliance report. But as a reminder, those financial statements are your financial statements to review and understand. And lastly, as I indicated, it's looking at that control environment and making any recommendations to strengthen those controls. Ultimately, this is what everybody is wanting from an audit, is an audit opinion. In this particular case, a clean audit opinion, or an unmodified version. It's the highest audit opinion that you can get, so congratulations. I'm sorry?
We were congratulating our administration on their hard
Okay.
work.
Yes, kudos to the group. So this is your financial statements, your balance sheet. If you happen to have your completed audit with you, I have referenced the various financial statements and page numbers if it's easier for you to refer to those as well. So you have both pieces of information. And this is your 3-year trend, again, looking at the balance sheet for general fund. And you will see your cash is continuing its downward trajectory. It's fell about $401,613 or 2.4%. Your total assets recovered from practically to the FY22 levels, rising $616,945 or 2.5%. Most of the increase is attributed to amounts owed by other funds to general fund, and that's about a $1.1 million change. And then you have some offsets, again, the biggest one being that reduction in cash. Total liabilities continued to increase by 1.6 million or 13%. And that the primary driver there was the amounts owed to other funds during this current fiscal year. And we'll talk more about fund balance in the next 2 slides, but you can see, over the 3-year trend, there is a downward trajectory there as well. I tend to bring up what's known as quick or current ratios. That kind of bridges the gap between public sector accounting and private sector accounting. Those two financial ratios tend to be your solvency ratios, or look at your ability to make your payments when due. And your current and quick ratio is 1.82, which means for every dollar of liabilities, you have $1.82 in assets. Typically, the current ratio, we'd like to be about 2. The quick ratio, we'd like to be at 1 or higher. So you're, right compatible with those industry benchmarks. I will also offer that you have 2 other major funds. That includes your ESSER 3 as well as your capital improvement projects. So your ESSER 3, you're waiting for about a $1.8 million reimbursement to cover costs for this year. And in your capital improvement fund, you have $7.2 million in fund balance that is dedicated for that purpose. And you drew down $1.9 million in expenditures this year. So as promised, looking at the fund balance, you will see how it's kind of divvied up between its different categories. There are 5 different categories. You use 3 of the 5, and they include the committed, which are designated for specific purposes. And you had your capital at $200,000, your regular instruction came in about $85,000, and your special ed at $100,000, totaling $385,000 for your committed fund balance. Your assigned fund balance totaled $2,565,000, and that was a set aside for FY25's budget. And you can see the detail of all of these committed and assigned fund balance in the footnotes. And they fall on page 46. And again, you see more specifically those different categories of fund balance on a 3-year trend. So your total fund balance, as a reminder, equals about $5.7 million. Your unassigned portion fell $3.9 million or 58.9%. And that's primarily seeing these changing classifications between unassigned to your assigned to your committed. So it was kind of like, parsing out those monies into a more specific purpose. Prior period corrections were made in the amount of $304,186, and that relates to capital assets and leases, which increase fund balance this particular year, as those corrections were posted to your financial statements. And we'd like to look at unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. Again, it's just a good litmus test to see how your coverage and your financial flexibility. In your particular case, you have an expenditure coverage of about 4.9% or about 2.5 weeks. So it's a little bit lean there. Looking at general fund revenues, and I'm moving to statement E on page 19. The total revenues were $54.9 million, and it increased $3.5 million or 6.9%. As with most districts, property taxes and state revenue, aid to education are your number one and two revenue sources for the particular school district or entity. In this case, your property taxes were your largest revenue source, making up 55.2% of your total revenues, and they increased by $3 million or 11.1%. Your intergovernmentals remained relatively flat. They had a slight uptick of about 284,302. And then you have your on behalf payment from the state of Maine for your teachers' fringe benefits and retirement. That totaled $482,275. This looks at revenues from a budget to actual standpoint. You had an overall revenue surplus of $419,889, or about 0.8% of your budgeted revenues. The bulk of this surplus reflects those charges for service, investment income, and other income and transfers that were not budgeted items for this particular year. And you see, the investment earnings as well as the other income were the driving forces between the overall surplus here. I apologize, this slide is a little crowded, although it probably doesn't look too bad on the screen that you are utilizing. But these are your 3-year trends for your expenditures. Your total expenditures rose by $2.7 million or 5.1% to an overall $55.4 million. And again, you are no different, unfortunately, than any other districts where regular instruction and special ed are your number 1 and 2 cost drivers. Instruction makes up 30.6% of the total expenditures, and then likewise special ed followed by 17.6% of total expenditures. I will highlight as well that miscellaneous category from FY23 represents unallocated fringe benefits. It's a slight difference between auditing firms on their financial statement presentations. It kind of looks a little funny, so I thought I'd provide an explanation for that. This slide depicts the budget to actual from an expenditure standpoint. You had no supplemental appropriations. The overall expenditure surplus was just under $53,000 or 0.1% of budget. So came in right on track there. The overall combined surplus totaled $472,882, and that reduced the planned surplus from $1.75 million to $1.3 million. You have one business type fund, it's school nutrition, and you will see the same information presented for that fund. In this case, we're starting out with the balance sheet. Your assets totaled just over $1.7 million, and they rose by 580,600 or 49.5%. We tend to highlight net capital assets here because assets play such a large role in these operations. In this particular case, your net capital assets totaled $283,158 and represents 16.5% of the total assets. The increase accounts for 41.5% of the overall increase. So again, heavily dependent on those capital assets. The other piece that caused the jump in total assets is your increase in cash that rose by $567,433, or 68.6%. And it accounts, like I mentioned, for the remainder. You did have an offset in your reductions in accounts receivable and inventory that totaled about $227,985. You had a jump in liabilities of just under $250,000 or 54.8%, and it was all attributed to the increase in amount owed to other funds. Your net position climbed $355,882. 78,260 resulted from operations, and the balance was a prior year correction. I will highlight also your unrestricted portion of net position, the one that provides the greatest financial flexibility, increased by $114,729 to a little over $830,000. This particular fund has a current ratio of 3, well over that standard of 2 that we'd like to see. Clearly, charges for service are your only phenomenal revenue for the school nutrition. It totaled $243,867. You did have a decrease of about $105,000 from the prior year. That represent about 30% decrease. You did have non-operating revenues that totaled over $2 million. That represents grants. That makes up about 80% of that non-operating revenue. That totaled 1.6, and you also had transfers in at $395,000 and interest earnings at $25,350. Again, looking at your 3-year trend on the expenditures, labor and supplies driving the bus here, no pun intended. So you had total operating expenses of $2.2 million. They rose slightly at $34,238 or 1.6%. And looking at labor, it represents 51.7% of the overall cost, followed by food and supply cost of 44.1%. Again, no remarkable surprises there. We did have a series of what we refer to as management letter comments that we are making to improve the overall operations and internal control environment within the district. So we had 7 or so comments that I'd like to run through with you. First is not all bank accounts were being reconciled, and some of the other bank accounts that were being reconciled were not being reconciled timely. And if they were reconciled, we still recommend they're not only reviewed by initial by the preparer, but also reviewed by somebody else, and they sign off on it as well. From the auditing standpoint, you will hear it referred to as cash is king. It's such an important function within any audit that all transactions run through cash. So that is the most important internal control that we emphasize from an audit standpoint. But additionally, you have other general ledger accounts. Those are those accounts that are on the balance sheet. They represent receivables, payables, fringe benefits that are payable to the vendor that may have residual balances left on there. We noted that those are not being reconciled on a timely basis throughout the year as well, which makes it challenging at year end to catch up all those reconciliations in one fell swoop, right before the audits. When you're looking at payroll, we are looking at booking the accrued payroll and the associated fringe benefits at the end of the fiscal year, particularly with the balance of contract that usually is a very material number for financial statements. So it's important that you evaluate that particular accrual and record that on your financial statements. Additionally, looking at the end of the year revenues and receivables to look at and make sure all of those revenues and receivables are posted in the proper year, to make sure it's known as the matching principle, where you're putting those revenues that match the expenditures that they incurred. So we looking at reviewing those deposits and those transactions typically that happen right those first couple months in July, August, and making sure those deposits are truly recorded in the proper fiscal year. Again, looking at your grant reconciliations and noting whether those balances are being reconciled in accordance with grant obligations out there, and if there are any reclasses, if there's any matching of information that needs to be posted. It's good to have that information done on a month-to-month basis rather than trying to catch those reconciliations up at the end of the fiscal year. Capital assets, that tends to be a hard element for some school districts to maintain. You have a lot of items out there. You have, multiple schools, multiple classrooms. So really knowing and tracking those fixed assets are important to make sure that those, not only for insurance purposes, but for financial statement purposes, that they're all being recorded and tracked on a routine basis. And lastly, we look at the minutes that are provided to help us determine what elements are happening during the school year that may have financial impacts on your on the statements. So it may include taking a vote to do a budget transfer, to record an award on a contract within the district, or something, some of those elements, settle a collective bargaining agreement if there are any out there. So we rely on those minutes to get that information, and those being approved by the governing body helps solidify that information as being valid. So again, it also complies with state laws out there that we would emphasize making sure minutes are recorded for all meetings that are conducted. And that pretty much concludes my presentation. I know it probably is a lot of numbers and a lot of information thrown at you. I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Well, first off, let me just say thank you so much. That was actually, I would say, a very digestible report. Those graphs are very helpful. That 3-year comparison, incredibly helpful. And so I think I'm comfortable speaking on behalf of the Finance Committee. That was excellent.
Thank you.
But with that, yeah, does anyone have any questions about the audit here? I see Jessica going for her mic.
Slide, let's see, one of the last ones we were just looking at. I think it's 14. And this might be a question for Evan and Heidi, actually. I was just curious with some of the notes there, the findings for month-to-month reconciliation. Was that during the time that we sort of had a business manager position in flux?
There was definitely staff turnover at that time, but I can say that these recommendations were also the recommendations we received in the 2023 fiscal year audit. They were essentially carried over, but we have addressed those internally, so.
You don't see them pop up for another audit or two,
Exactly.
even though they've all been addressed in the last couple months,
Correct.
at least.
Yeah.
I could, if that is the case, please feel free to work with your auditor and let them know that, because we can incorporate that information into these comments.
That's really good to know. Thank you for giving us the heads up.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, real quickly, as just a reminder, we only got our fiscal 23 audit just a handful of months ago, so we're catching up, which is good, but it does mean we'll see some repetitive comments. Go ahead, Jessica, with your follow-up.
Thanks. The second question I had, slide 9, commentary block miscellaneous in fiscal year 23 represents unallocated fringe benefits. Difference between different audit firms' presentation. Can you just elaborate on that just a little bit?
So we are relatively new to your audit. So different firms, depending on how they set up their financial statements and how they report their templates, may have some inconsistencies in comparative information. That happens to be one. The other piece of that is, I think we were able to allocate the fringe benefits to the cost centers that there were supposed to be this year. So I think between the two pieces, you didn't see that unallocated portion for FY24. And I would move it forward that in FY25, that will slowly start to drop off as we move forward with the audits.
Anyone else? Well, I think you did such a good job that we have no more questions, it seems.
Okay, great.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. This is a real, incredibly positive audit experience that I'm, for one, I'm very excited about. And I can't help but notice you have a double H name. I have a double H name. Double H names are great, so.
Yes. Well, happy Monday to everybody, and I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and I'm really looking forward to this snow stopping anytime it wants to. So
That sounds about right. Thank you so much,
right,
Heather. You
bye-bye.
have a wonderful night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, Heidi and Evan, I guess I'll just sort of say, wrapping up the audit presentation, good job getting us a really solid audit firm. That was incredibly detailed. And while I won't confess I'm a master of every number I just got presented, I feel like I understood it all. And that's pretty impressive. So thank you for helping with that. And are we getting ready to kick off FY25?
We signed our engagement letter for 25. They haven't come back to us yet with the schedule for when they're going to begin the 25 audit, but the deposit's paid and the engagement letter signed. So now we're just, as we wrap up this, I think we'll hear more hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic.
Heather is the director of the audit. We actually have same company, but we have other folks on her team that actually do the testing.
The day-to-day.
Yeah.
And then we need to formally accept the audit, right? As a board, we take a vote. Is that correct? I believe that's what we did in the last one. Is there any issue with us adding it to this coming Thursday's meeting, or should we just wait and do it in April? I guess is my question. I don't know, Ryan, if you have an opinion, or Heidi, or Evan.
I don't have any objection. I would say, I would encourage us to do it and keep moving.
Yeah. It's not on the slate yet. We can add it tonight as part of adjustments. It'll be 3 days in advance, and it was noticed as part of our finance committee meetings. I don't feel like it's super surprising, but if we're concerned about that, we could certainly wait until April. I'm not trying to get too
Meeting in
aggressive.
2 weeks, right?
Uh,
Like our next meeting comes up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's relatively fast. So if we've got some concerns, we can wait. And I don't think it holds us back for anything, so.
We're ready to do it if you want.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was not on the agenda as published Friday without any attachments, so it would definitely be an addition. I think we'd include this as part of it, yeah, the official audit documents as well as this, but we are sort of asking questions on their behalf, so.
I would encourage us to move forward.
So Heidi, do you guys think you can get that updated tonight just to sort of maximum update visibility. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, with that, we're going to have a brief little report from the admin. So as we heard all the superintendent budget presentations, which we all got to hear 3 or 4 times, depending on which meetings you went to, I think the only thing that we had not heard about proposal-wise ahead of time was the nurse staffing. So I asked Heidi to just talk to us a little bit about what that plan is, so we understand what that budget change encompasses. So Heidi?
Sure.
All yours.
So, thank you, Hudson. So yeah, we have been talking about nursing staff for a little bit of time. And I spent quite a bit of time talking with Amy Hamilton, who is our clinical coordinator and helps to oversee all of these departments. And so the rationale behind replacing the health aides with full-time RNs is we do have a rise in student health needs. We have a rise in significant medical needs and mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. And our goal is really, as Amy Hamilton Hall has been talking about, and has done a board presentation as well, as we're really trying to keep students in their community schools. So special education will look different, where the hub was formerly at Woodside. Now all these complex students, or these students with complex medical needs, will now be in their buildings. And so it's really equitable to have that level of healthcare in every single school. And nurses have specific qualifications over health aides and more things that they can do where health aides are not able to do that. So for just an example, I'll just give you a couple of them, go through the entire document. But education and medical background. So a school nurse is required to have a college degree, a BSN preferred, or an ASN matriculated into a bachelor's program, where a health aide is not required to have any medical background, and the minimal education is high school level. And clinical judgment and assessment is really important when you're dealing with these complex needs. The nurses possess clinical judgment and assessment skills to evaluate health condition, and this allows for a holistic view of the patient, where a health aide, it's really non-existent. The primary focus is on first aid and record keeping. So those are just several of the differences. A legal role around this is that nurses are able to write the medical portion of legal documents, like individualized healthcare plans or IEPs and 504 plans, which require professional medical license to sign off on. And in summary, health aides provide first aid, administer prescribed medications, help with health screenings, follow health plans, but are not required to have any kind of medical background. And they also require nurse supervision from a nurse who is familiar with the students, their health plans, and their diagnosis. So even though we have health aides, the nurses still have to know as much and be as involved as a health aide, like they would have them in their buildings. So I do have a lot more I could talk about with this, but it's a lot. So I didn't know if you had any questions or that I could answer.
It seems like a good starting point at the very least. Any questions about the proposal? Kim and then Gregory? And
Well,
then Jessica.
I'm still trying to catch up, and I apologize for needing remediation. So, because I believe many of us received an email about this too. And so am I correct from what you said earlier that currently some of our elementary buildings have nurses, RNs, and some just have health aides?
So they all have a nurse that oversees, and they fill in where the nurses can't. So we have some nurses that are there maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and then a health aide fills in the rest of the time.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is we're eliminating all of the health aides, and every building will now have their own nurse.
Got it. Thank you.
Gregory?
I know sometimes we have positions that we can't fill. Is this something that's going to be 2 nurses? Is that something that's easily filled? Do you think there's nurses out there that, for school particularly?
Well, in my belief, my perception is that nurses in schools is really highly sought after. And so I'm hoping that this is good. I do know some folks that are looking for nursing jobs that have already reached out to me over the years. And I said we didn't have any positions at that point because we haven't lost nurses. So I hope that that's not the case and that we are able to fill them pretty quickly once we post them.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Jessica?
I think the budget implication was it like 140?
So no, actually that's the cost of 2 nurses, but with the deduction in health aides, Evan, do you want to talk about the actual cost?
Yeah, so the cost of the two nurses is estimated to be about $150,000. And then the reduction of the health aides, the net out would be around $50,000 increase to the overall budget.
Okay, got it. In the second part of the question, see if I can formulate this. So health aides are currently providing primarily first aid, record keeping, medication administration. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Reactive care is what you want to think about. So if the students come in and they have it, like if a situation happens and it, Amy gave a great example today and I'm forgetting the example she used, but a nurse would be able to treat that particular student at that moment without having to send the child home or somewhere off location for that whatever particular event that happens, where a health aide would more than likely have to call an emergency or call for, the parent to come and pick the child up. But the nurse was able to treat the student instead and keep a child in school.
Okay. And so I did hear you say, and I absolutely feel this, excuse me. I understand that this is a fact in our schools with the rising levels of anxiety, depression, and some of the other very undesirable facts that you threw out there. So in a practical situation, a student comes into the nurse's office, they find a health aide versus a nurse, and they're presenting a reactive situation. Those health aides are under the supervision of a nurse,
Correct.
ultimately.
Correct.
So having a nurse versus a health aide would allow the student to stay in school. And how frequently do you think that situation presents itself?
I don't know that answer, actually, but I could certainly find that information out for you.
I'm only asking and pressing a little bit because I just wonder, in a hospital setting, nurses have LPNs, actually they're called, or CNAs, or whatever they're called these days. I think those titles have changed. They are under the direct supervision of an RN too. So I'm just trying to kind of equate that to the school situation.
Sure, and a health aide is in a school by themselves and they're having to reach out to the nurses in other schools, then therefore taking those nurses away from the healthcare centers that they're already in, with dealing with the numbers of students and number of incidents that occur within those buildings. So now they're having to reach out to that nurse and pull them away in order for them to supervise what's happening in that situation. So that's at that moment.
Go for it, Kim.
I can imagine that you and Amy and others probably did a little benchmarking of what other districts do. I mean, how insightful was that into the thinking?
It was very insightful, actually. I reached out to all the area superintendents that I have text message chain with, and they all do have school nurses in their buildings. They all have RNs in each of their buildings.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Heidi, and please thank Amy for us as well for helping gather that information. All right, everybody, it's that time we've all been waiting for. Budget deliberation shall begin. So I don't come to you with a lot of structure today. My thinking was that today would be a little more, let's feel our way through responses to what we've seen, what we've heard, what our own thoughts. And that next week, I know that last year, Ryan and Evan had sort of developed sort of a spreadsheet that helped them look at some of the options and comparisons. I think we can start diving into that with a little more granularity. After we sort of had our initial bite at the apple tonight, as it were. I do want to point out, so Heidi circulated a printout for us, which just sort of shows what the differences might look like with various budget increase numbers. This is not broken up by anything other than totals, and then what that might mean to local shares. But this is sort of just helpful for us as a compass, shall we say, as we start talking. But I guess sort of the first, to kick us off, we've all seen the superintendent's proposal at least twice. I think most of us 3 or 4 times, again, depending on how many town presentations you were able to make it to. what are some initial reactions or thoughts? What are we thinking as a committee at this point? I see Gregory.
Brave man.
I'm only going first because as a teacher, I hate it when nobody raises their hands, so,
Mm.
so I can't complain. Yeah, I favor the proposed budget of what the superintendent and Evan put forward.
And actually, I'll jump on that and say, regardless of what we talk about tonight into next week, I think we can all agree a lot of very hard, detailed work has gone down. And let me say, maybe for the umpteenth time, thank you, Heidi, thank you, Evan, thank you to all your admin staff and teams. This is clearly the output of a lot of labor, and regardless of any adjustments or questions we may have, we have a lot of gratitude and respect for the work that went into this, so thank you. I also am a muller. I like to sit and think things through. So if people need a minute to sit and think about comments, statements, questions, that is okay. We don't have to fill every moment of silence. So I'm going to be quiet now and wait. Jessica.
This is not a well-formed thought, so pardon my yarn here. At our last Finance Committee meeting, we were in Bowdoin and heard a couple of really passionate pleas from the community about finding places to cut our budget. And I hear that. Things are too expensive for people right now in general. A couple people gave really compelling examples of how they're doing that in their own businesses even. And I really heard that. And when I look at our budget, I can't find a lot of places to cut. So I feel like we are, again, I served on the Finance Committee last year too, and I feel like we said the same thing last year. And another budget committee meeting this year with selectmen, Ryan and Topsom said, you know, we're increasing, we're going toward a bigger budget in the future. Yes, we are. I don't know the solution to this either. And to Hudson's point about advocacy for, you know, bringing to the state level that towns need more support. So I guess I'm just opening up a conversation here because this is deliberation, but I can see things from both sides. I don't think the budget is a big, I don't think it's exuberant, or that's not the right word, extraordinary. Exorbitant, thank you. And I don't think it's too lean either, but I do think it's a lot.
I went to all three meetings, and I think, like Jessica said, I'm trying to find where is it, and I also pay attention to the other towns, and I feel like we're like lower than other towns in the area concerning their budget. So I appreciate the great job you all did. I definitely echo everything that Jessica said, and I wish property taxes was not the only source of revenue to support the budget along with the state. I hope the formula will be more helpful to us. But I think we have a responsible budget, and we started with our mission. I think we met our mission at the beginning, is to maintain the budget, the services, and I think we're doing that.
Thank you, Gregory. Frank.
Budget time is always difficult. It's, it puts us between a rock and a hard place every year. However, the work that went into this budget to get us to 6.1% was incredible. And I too, Greg, I support it as it is. But I also see the need to examine what it means to make a reduction um, down from that 6.11 stepwise, one step at a time? What do we lose? I want to know the details of what we lose as it proceeds down our list. What are we striking from the budget? What does that mean for staffing? What does that mean for our overall plan for the best education we can possibly give to our students? So I'd like to hear what we lose under each scenario.
So, yeah, I don't know, Heidi and Evan, if you're able to speak to that tonight. Obviously, there are some specific positions you shouldn't be calling out at this point as hypotheticals, but maybe we can get an idea of like what, to whatever granularity is possible, let me put it like that, knowing that that may be limited from a employment perspective. And it's okay if you have rough approximations today, and we dive into that with more granularity in a week as well. I don't feel too on the spot about that.
We are definitely prepared for this, and my administrative staff, we've been working really hard with them. We met again today and talked about them. Evan and I have been meeting almost on a daily basis, going line by line, again through the budget to make sure that we haven't missed anything. We have a running spreadsheet, which I'm not going to share tonight because there is a lot of information on there, but we're trying to figure out scenarios. Things that I can share that we're looking at. One major thing would be we had 250,000 in the safety and security line. That's something that we've been trying to put in there each year. We're looking at reducing that by 120,000 because to get to 5.5%, rather than 6.11. We just kind of put these stages in 5.5, 5.0, 4.5, and 4.0. 5.5 is $353,138 that we would have to find in the budget. I just found 120,000, but what's the cost of that? That's the cost of security and things that we're not going to be able to do for our buildings. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily impact students, but it doesn't impact them in front of students. So those are the types of things that we're looking at. We have a phone upgrade for about 40,000 that Evan will be able to, it's something that we need to do. We definitely need a phone upgrade, but we are going to take it out of a line this year, which will then affect our fund balance. However, we have a software business line, office line, and I can't remember specifically what the software is, but anyways, it's in the business office for about 23,000. Those are things that we can skimp and, push as far as we can to get close to the penny. It's just minimal stuff. And that's the kind of things, it's like looking at pencil erasers and going across and saying, all right, we're going to cut 50 pencil erasers because that's going to cost us $100. And we're going to slowly get to that. The next thing that we're going to go into is staffing. And these are staffing positions that have people in them. And so it's big to get to those numbers that we're looking at on here. We're talking custodians, we're talking teachers across the board. We have talked about district-wide positions. We have talked about low-impact stipends, meaning have we filled these stipends over the last several years? They won't come out of the contract, but they may not be paid for this year because we just can't afford to run that program. So we don't want to make further cuts, but in a tight budget year, we do understand what these ongoing financial pressures are ahead, and we really need to be fiscally responsible. We do not want to make these cuts again because every position now, besides the things that I just listed for you, and I don't think I missed anything on there, we do have an unfilled bus driver position, but we hope to fill that position because we've increased our bus routes from 22 to 21 or decreased our bus routes from 22 to 21 and buses are packed. Kids are on buses longer now. So we don't want to have to do that because, we do have, we're fingers crossed that we do get 14% instead of 15% with our health insurance because that's the total of $58,000. But you are looking at a total of almost 10 teachers just to get to plus an admin at $521,000. So that's a lot, that's all people. And we have nowhere else to go. I don't think Evan and I, like I said, we've been meeting almost on a daily basis over the last few weeks and really trying to go through line by line by line to see where we could go and how we could make this work. It's kind of a little bit like a chess game. So the other thing I wanted to mention was, we're going to continue to identify areas with the least impact on operations. It does take a lot to run a school system. You need your transportation, you need your facilities, you need, your custodians, you need lights, you need all of these things to make everything work. But these decisions that we decide, if we decide to keep all these positions, it really does reflect our community values. And our community values are that we like small class sizes, and that we want to have activities for all of our students and our communities to engage in. And so now we're talking about the real meat, because over the last several years since Evan and I have been here, we have gone through the budget again, line by line. I know I keep saying that, but it's what we do. And we have taken unfilled positions and we have removed them. And it's a true reflection of what these numbers mean. So that's my spiel tonight.
Good spiel, good spiel. Gregory.
I also think, like, when it comes to the phone system and the safety expenses, that it might be fiscally irresponsible to push things off to the next year, because are they going to get cheaper? They're most likely going to get more expensive. And I also think, I remember too, that even supporting my position, there's a process, and I know the board welcomes people to come to to the Orion Center meeting. The towns get to vote. So we're just part of the process as a finance committee with the ultimate outcome. But so I just wanted to talk about how deferred maintenance has been historically something that has come back to bite the district in terms of the school construction, and we're just putting things off and off and off, and then you have a big bill to pay.
Jessica.
I would agree with that, the phones and the security. I think this is probably a good year to keep it in, because when we look ahead for the next few years, we're going to be incorporating bigger capital expenditures. So it's, trying to avoid the very larger increases. So yeah, just mentioning for any public listening that none of the capital projects are included in this year's budget, but they will be coming along in the next few years. So we need to keep that in mind as we decide on this year's budget.
Got a soundtrack too in the hallway. It's a question to the committee. So we have this graduated percentage increase sheet that admin has given to us. I guess I'll sort of say that I would be interested in hearing a little more detail next week. And again, we're not done for the night, to be clear. We've got more time, but about the 5 and 5.5% lines, not because I'm gung-ho about the level of cuts that those would mean, but I think that those are probably worth looking at what that pain is, right? This is the line we sort of heard in years past, like, what's the pain? Show us the pain. Not because we want to embrace it or jump into it, but to just understand it. And so oftentimes you understand it so you can say no to the pain, to be very clear, right? Like, to know what something means. Again, I'm speaking for myself only. I don't see a reality where we look at a 4 or 4.5% increase given where we're at now and what that would mean. But I do wonder, and I'd be curious how the committee felt, that it might be worth hearing a little more about the 5 and the 5.5. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in, Hudson, to say I agree with that. And I mean, I'm just looking at the proportional dollar value reduction that's necessary to get to 5.0, to get to a 5.0 increase. And that's a lot. I mean, that's the kind of cuts that Heidi was characterizing before. I think it's really important for the board to at least understand, like, if we were to land at 5.5, just hypothetically speaking, to understand the distinction programmatically between that budget versus one that gets us to a 5.0 increase. The other thing that's going through my brain rhetorically, you don't need to get into the details of it now, but is really understanding the administration and this committee's best thinking about use of the fund balance and sort of, how that factors in, because I know that's something that you all have been grappling with and projecting really carefully, Evan. And I was reminded too, this is my first rodeo on the finance committee, so I'm sort of learning to think in all of these ways, but when I was looking at the statements for the current fiscal year in terms of how your expenses are running, and getting Evan and Heidi's best thinking about, where you think we're going to end at the end of this year to help inform how we think about the budget, the fund balance, and where it fits into all of this. Because it may very well be that there's a combination of things that we need to be looking at to get to where we think we need to get to. You don't need to respond to that now, Evan, although you're welcome to if you want to.
We can respond to that actually, because that's what we've been preparing. So I think it's important that we do talk a little bit about it. Evan will talk about the fund balance, but I kind of want to go back and talk to you about what does it take to get there. And so within our list, because we've been working on this, for example, we have $40,000 that is there for professional development that's in the general ed budget. We're going to move that into the Title II professional development lines. It does take away from that for other things, but that means that we could move that in there. We have an unfilled bus driver position. That it doesn't affect staff, but it affects the overall routes if we can fill that. We have some open. We're going to have a few open by June. We feel okay about that right at the moment. We have the phone upgrade that will move into this year's budget for $40,000, and then we have the software at the business office, and then the hope that the health insurance comes in it and we save $58,000. So you're talking $200,000 right there, and now we need to find another $153,000. That means staff, and whatever combination of staff it is to get to 5.5%. That's what the first thing that we would do would be. We would look at that.
Because the 200,000 includes the reduction that you're thinking about on that safety and security line too?
No, not yet, no, but it could. Actually, I forgot to add that in there. So that's another 120. So now we're looking at, in order to get there, that's another about 35,000 that I would need to find in that staff.
Yep.
So that's just, that would be your tier 2 from where we've already cut in the original budget submission, where we called that tier 1. Those are tier 2 things. Need to add that in actually. So yes, it would include that if we wanted to say another 120,000 off that budget line.
And am I to understand that you're still carrying the $100,000 for major maintenance?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
We don't dare take that out. There's too many with our buildings, and our
Yep.
buildings are in good shape, but they are old and
Yep.
things don't last quite as long as they need to.
Indeed. My family's, both parents, siblings, experiences with refrigerators and ovens backs that up, unfortunately.
So I'm going to let Evan talk about the fund balance, because that is a really important piece of this whole budget.
So with the fund balance, I'm expecting somewhere between 900,000 and 1.1 million in surplus at the end of the year. That could change. I don't want to be held to that number, just because there's a lot of things that change from now until the end of the fiscal year. One example that I gave just this morning was that as teachers retire, all the accrued sick time that they have, they get paid out for that. And that is a little bit of it's hard to calculate that when staff members, whether that be support staff or teachers, decide to leave at the end of the year. We have a lot of reimbursements that come to our office towards the end of the fiscal year, whether that be mileage reimbursements, maybe a staff member had bought something for their classroom and they need reimbursement. That stuff tends to work itself out in June, and I don't have as much visibility into those last minute requests for reimbursement like I do with just the normal day-to-day operations. We're trying to get a better handle on that kind of stuff and encourage people to really submit those stuff on a timely monthly basis. But as of right now, I definitely am seeing that we should have a surplus at the end of the year based on unfilled positions that, have gone throughout the year, but it's just too hard to say at this moment what that exact number will be.
And that would be an additional roughly $1 million on top of the unexpended fund balance we have, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what I'm not considering in here is our interest income that we have that accrues interest in our bank. So at any time, we can receive as little as $14,000 or as up to $35,000 in interest on a month-to-month basis, depending on what the balance of that account is. One of my big initiatives is to make sure we have as much money in our bank account at all times so that we get as much interest as possible. But that's something that is a nice to have instead of, you can't just rely on that as like your, I think as just like steady income that you can predict, because there's a lot of moving parts throughout a payroll or a expenditure month. If you have a payroll with three months in it and you only get your state subsidy once per month, you have a lot more going out than you do coming in. So there's just a little bit of flux and play there. So.
Thank you, Evan.
Yep.
I don't know if Kim, I'm sorry if I'm taking your question, but was the question that you're asking about what, like, I remember like couple months ago, there was this point about, do we have 2 million go to the budget or 1.5? And I asked you what was your recommendation, what was fiscally responsible, and you recommended 1.5. Would you mind just talking about why you recommended that?
I think at this point, I have projected we have about $2.7 million in our fund balance. So if we went with a $2 million assignment to offset taxes, we would be down to only about 700,000 in our fund balance. So I think even maybe 1.5 is still on the higher end, but I think if we used even less fund balance than that, the burden on the taxpayers would be pretty extreme. We could certainly run those numbers with a lower fund balance utilization, but I wanted to illustrate that if we did use a number that was closer to the number we had been using for the last 2 years, we would really wipe out that fund balance quicker than we had probably expected.
And yeah, as a reminder, the past couple of years, we've used about 2.5, 2.6 million.
2.56.
Hey, there we go. I knew there was a 6 in there somewhere.
Yep.
And that had crept up over the last couple of years in part because our fund balance was big post-COVID. There was a lot of money that was unfilled positions, meaning carryovers and whatnot. I actually think it speaks to the strength of our budgeting that our after the year surpluses are coming down. I think that's actually really good because we're not asking for more money than we need, right? So I think that reflects strong fiscal control. But the flip side of that is there's less in the fund balance. And so I do think we have to start drawing down. And I would just sort of say, like, we're using $1 million less of our fund balance. That's 5% right there. That's 4.5%, in fact. $931,000 reduction gets us to a 4.5% increase. I mean, our fund balance change offsets that. Now, that's not me saying, let's spend another $1 million, but just sort of illustrating where being fiscally responsible does lead to some short-term pain with that increase. That increase will not be present in the same way next year because we're not coming down off of a high fund balance. This has to happen sometime. I don't know that it makes any sense to do it any slower, to be honest. Like I see an appeal to maybe trying to step it down a little more, but I honestly don't know that that's reasonable given, again, how good our budgeting is right now as far as what we're actually expending. But 2 cents.
I don't remember which town it was in, but somebody did bring up that, well, why do you have such a high fund balance? And we don't really have a high fund balance anymore. And it's really important when you have a good solid fund balance, that means your budget for the district is healthy. And, you know, we do not want to draw it down to zero. We do not want to draw it down to 700,000 because something could happen. We rely on a lot of federal funds to be reimbursed. And we have to sometimes, am I saying that correctly? Okay. I was all of a sudden thinking I wasn't. But we don't want to do that because it's a sign, a good solid fund balance, a healthy fund balance is a good sign that your budget is in a good place. Yeah. And right now with the 2.7 and then hopefully at the end of the year, we'll have a little bit more. We feel that that's a really healthy place to be in.
Frank?
Yeah, I was going to just say that it's prudent of us to make sure that we have a strong fund balance and not get it down there too far, because there are things that will come up, particularly with older superstructure of our district we have a lot of places that could suddenly require a big cash flow. And so we need that just as a safety zone right now.
The other thing that we did a few years ago is we created some reserve lines. For example, when special education had a certain amount of money in their out-of-district line, we reduced that. I believe it was like by 100,000, and we put it in a reserve line, which essentially is moving it out of the taxpayer,
Mike's
but
not getting
using,
anymore. I don't know what happened, but
what's that?
your mic's not getting you.
Oh, sorry. We're essentially moving it out of the taxpayer cost into back and pulling it from the fund balance to create this line in case you need it. I don't necessarily recommend that anymore because we're still using that fund balance, but that's how you lower the taxes. It's a little bit, you can do that when you have a good, healthy fund balance. But if something is needed, there's no sense to take it out because you need it at that time.
Yeah.
I have a couple quick questions specific to the facilities budget and it's on the capital construction. And I don't know if this has evolved since when this was presented back in January, I think. But in this, there was the $100,000 for bathroom construction at Bowdoin Central. Is that different than was the other one that we just approved Bowdoin Ham or Bowdoin?
It's the revolving.
The revolving
fund.
renovations fund that we just approved?
Yep.
Is that the same as this?
Yeah, and I asked Sean about that, because we got awarded that funding from the state, if we could pull that $100,000 out for the Bowdoin bathroom renovation, and he said that there are plenty of projects to fill in there. So at the time, I
Checks out.
left it, yeah.
Yeah, we don't recommend that because those are things like, for example, well, my years are running together now, but we had an elevator situation at the middle school that cost us $90,000 and we had to pay for that. We had no extra money in the budget for that. So something always comes up that breaks and
The asbestos.
asbestos
Yeah.
situation, while we got some money back for that, that's where it came out of. So we leave that in there because these types of projects will come up across the district. We just don't know where and when, but it's just a matter of at some point it will happen. We got $57,000 from the revolving fund grant to pay for most of that bathroom in Bowdoin, and the rest of it is coming out of the bond, which we will go in June for that as well. The $10,000 extra or whatever it is.
I guess my thought would be one thing we could do with that is just take some additional fund balance and allocate towards that as a line item and not have that in like actually put into the budget and a what if amount potentially.
So take that 100,000 and put it as a reserve line is what you're
Yeah,
suggesting?
it's just a thought. Like, I'm just thinking when I was looking, the other question I had here, and I don't remember, it's on the same category of stuff, was for the Harpswell Community School. There was $150,000 for a roof replacement. And I don't remember if that was the full amount or if that was a modified amount based on, I can't remember which roof we talked about, because we talked about a couple of the potential of trying to get them by. Because I think since this budget was presented, there've been more discussions that we've had and some thinking has evolved potentially about do we want to limp along a little bit longer with some of those while we figure out what we're going to do? And is there an opportunity to bring that number down?
That's the issue right now, is there are some things that are in there that need to be taken care of. But we're also waiting for the master plan to make a decision on that, because if in a couple of years we're going to build a whole new school, we're not going to fix the roof for $1 million if we're going to build a new school. So those are the things that we need to make some decisions on if we're going to do that. But some things are critical and can't go unrepaired.
Okay. Those are the only two questions I had.
They're good questions. Kim?
I'm sorry if my novice shtick is running thin. I have a lot of questions.
Please, questions are good. We want questions.
I have no agenda here, but I'm mindful, I've been thinking about how the Region 10 budget fits into all of this. And I think the world of Region 10, and I have no agenda in asking this question. So it truly is, I'm seeking to learn about the process, because I'm mindful that obviously the needs are profound at Region 10. The program is thriving and growing. And yet I think we probably have a budget from Region 10 that contemplates more of a growth in expenditures than maybe what we're talking about here. And I truly don't understand how it works. And I can imagine RSU 5 and Brunswick may be facing similar pressures. Is there ever a part of the process where Region 10 reexamines its request in light of budgetary pressures that the sending districts may have? And
Yeah,
again,
the only-
no agenda. I'm not
Mhm.
looking to put this on Region 10 at all.
Trying to learn about the process.
All fits together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only time that they'll actually reevaluate that is if our budgets fail. And they
Okay.
have to go back to the drawing board, but because their budget is dependent on all of our budgets passing.
Got it.
And so it will be, they probably won't take much out if ours don't pass. But that's the conversation we actually had the other day at Region 10. So it really is, their cost is going up because their enrollment is going up.
Sure. Great. Thank you for teaching me how it works,
Yeah,
Heidi.
Good question. And understanding process is always important. So again, I'll sort of just say as Hudson, not as the chair of the committee. I think it's important that we think about potential decreases, not because I don't have total faith in the admin's budget here. I believe you wholeheartedly. This is what you think the best budget for the students of our district is. And I think you're correct. I don't actually doubt that at all. Very clear. But knowing that we're looking at $100 million of expenditures on the horizon, and we're not committed to a timeline, specific costs, specific funding mechanisms. I want to be very clear, but knowing that that conversation is, no matter what, pointing towards $100 million, right? Like the most amount of work, the least amount of work, it still averages to around 90 to 110 or whatever, right? So like 100 is a good ballpark. I do think that we need to at least consider, not necessarily decide to recommend, but to consider what some reductions would look like to help set that up, that kind of, that pending increase up. And again, that's not me saying I think that's the best thing for next year, but if knowing that the best thing for the next 10 years might mean a little belt tightening now to make that more palatable, more successful. And again, I'm not saying I think that is in fact the answer we should decide on. I do think we need to consider some of that. So again, I'm just reiterating what I said earlier. So I think we should, if it's possible to get a little more granularity on the specifics of 5 and 5.5 for our next meeting, that will be useful for us, maybe just so we can reject it, to be very clear, but so that we can understand it, if that makes sense. I don't know if the committee has any thoughts on that, but that's Gregory.
Follow that up with also cost savings that you see, because we talked about like the other day finding the need for special ed totally, but also you said we could possibly bring it down based on the new special ed director. And pre-K, also more pre-K equals more students equals more funding. So I appreciate the belt tightening, but I'm also kind of like a one day at a time. Can't predict the future. What are our needs now? Who knows what could happen? A worker breakout.
Good. Yeah, absolutely, Gregory. That's a very good point. Sorry, I mean, did sound.
Are you suggesting or are you asking directive to look at 5.5 and 5.0%?
So that's my proposal. I guess I don't want to speak on the committee's behalf too strongly, but that's what I would sort of pitch to the committee, I guess, on a more official level, so that we can just see some more detail, which again, no decisions having been made, just curiosity at this stage. I see a yes from Jessica, yes from Kim. Any objections from Frank or Gregory about just seeing what that looks like? Okay. Are you comfortable asking for that for a week from now, Frank?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you have that information already prepared.
We have categories of positions, and in order to get to 5.5%, I would add in there the things that I talked about that do not have people attached to them. And that's easy. I can tell you that right away. I can come up with $353,138 based on those numbers. By finagling, again, shuffling things around, it would be $40,000 out into Title II, 120,000, and we're going to be a little more than 353,000 if I put the whole safety and security line in, 120,000 for that, 41,000 for a bus driver. We reduced, I forgot to say this one before, but we reduced the new athletic request by 33,000. You know, do we think that that's okay? We can do it incrementally. Again, the cost goes up. Those are items that are needed. They're not excessive. Phone upgrade is 40,000. Software business office is 23,000. And then we still don't know the answer to health insurance, but having calculated that at 58,000. And then we did it, this is minor, but it's still something, is 5,000 for fuel, motor fuel, because we've had a lot in that line over the last few years. And so we felt moderately comfortable putting that in there based on everything that's going on. Who knows? But that's an area that we thought we might be able to save.
Yeah, just speaking to the motor fuel thing, thinking about reducing it $5,000 more than we already have, is that as we retire our diesel fleet, diesel is a more expensive fuel. We'll be utilizing less diesel. So we hope that because we'll be streamlining our fuel type within the bus garage, that we'll see less fluctuations between the two fuel prices of the diesel and the unleaded.
Yeah. Another question, I'm just going to speak because I didn't see other hands. You just mentioned athletics. Are there any other of the requests that you might consider shaving off if we were saying get to 5.5, get to 5? And it's okay, again, if you're not sure what that answer is tonight, but I think just from like the new request and sort of knowing like you took the MOE and you got it down to, what was it, 60.8, and then we added 607,000 on top of that. I'm not advocating slash it all, but I'm just curious, right? You mentioned athletics. Are there other new asks that might be lower on the priority list? And the answer is no, that's fine. I'm just true curiosity.
The new asks are important to each of the programs. And so what we did is we matched up things that we felt could be taken out. The principal, Evan and I did it for about a week straight of going back and forth on different things. And then we met with the principals and directors today. And I showed them that list that I was going to show you tonight, talk to you about tonight. And then they all gave their thoughts and said, no, we could do without this, or we could try this. And so then they did that. And so what I'm looking at and proposing for right now, I didn't think I added that right on that calculator. It is just around 400,000, which would get us to 5.5. And those are the things that I just listed for you, with some flexibility on both sides.
Of course.
You know, and then that doesn't. The 58,000 is still a question because I don't know that if that's going to be that. We may end up having to pay. So that's kind of like,
We can't count on that.
we're waiting. Fingers are crossed, but I thought it was 180 this morning. I'm like, did we think of 180,000 for health? Oh gosh, that's great. And they're like, no, it's 58. I was like, oh yeah, okay.
We'll still take it though.
We'll take it.
But yeah, and so so it sounds like, in looking at those new requests, you essentially structure them all with pay-fors, sort of like matched up. So, which is totally what I would expect, to be clear. I'm just curious if there's other things that we could look at.
And remember, we did shave a lot off by moving things. We had the requests that went in, for example, position will go into the local entitlement budget, which is a federal funding for special education. And so we have a pre-K, so we can put money in there and we get reimbursed for that at some point, at a higher rate. So that's what we did, is we kind of moved the parts to see where they would fit in so that everybody would get what they needed. And then we take away the things that would least impact students.
Great.
I guess the only thing I'll add is that we started the year with a goal to implement the strategic plan and support maintenance of our facilities and infrastructure with minimal impact of local contribution. So there's a line there where we don't live up to our goal. The farther we go down, right? And so, I've looked at the budget. I can't find a place. And I think, would you say that to live up to our goal, it's a 6.1, and we start not living up to our goal when we go down to 5.5? based on what you just talked about, safety and all the other things that you mentioned.
So I think that everything we've talked about from the beginning of this year and end of last year is all driven towards our strategic plan. And that has been the message and been pretty clear across the board. And that every time somebody, a principal or director talks about it, they're proposing those things based on meeting those goals. And so the more you cut from that, the longer it's going to take us to get to where we need to be. We have a 5-year strategic plan. That's what we're working towards. And everything that we're designing is student and outcome-based for students. So yes, I would agree with that statement, Gregory.
Is there other information that anybody on the committee or not, right, as well, would like to have, would like to consider, would like to see? Because this is our chance to ask for that. And I would say that we've been very good about asking information that is useful to us, and I would encourage us to continue thinking along those lines. So I don't know if anyone has any other stuff. I've asked about the 5 and 5.5 a little bit for next time.
I have one more.
Oh, please, of course.
So school budgets are a really interesting beast by themselves, because the other part of this is, in order to get money from the federal government, which could change at any moment, who knows? However, for special education, you have to meet your maintenance of effort, and you can't just cut things to get rid of things. So if our maintenance of effort came in at what, I don't even know what it was last year, 5.5 something, we can't technically go below that unless we have a very solid reason. For example, we lost 700 students in the district. That would be a reason. So it has to be like based on enrollment, high cost out of district kids coming back into the district, teachers retiring that cost a lot of money on the teacher's salary scale. Those are the types of things that are allowable. And if you start to go below it and you don't have a justification, then you lose money on that side of it. So they don't make it easy for you. So we have to just keep that in mind as we move through this.
Jessica.
I am reminded by, again, going back to the Bowdoin district meeting, if you're looking for that 5.5 number, or perhaps, yeah, probably the 5.5, maybe it would make it a 5.55. There is a Polaris $10,000 ATV for dragging the fields, which I think is a great idea. Those fields are far from, I think it would be a great vehicle to have. I'm not against having it. However, if we're looking at line items that are non-student related, the thing I would encourage us to think about is there, and not to open a can of worms, but is there a facilities vehicle that could be used for that presently?
Well, I was thinking about that. We did have a selectman, I believe, say that she was going to go to a store and get it.
Town clerk.
Volunteer to give us one.
Hey, Mel, if you're listening.
To donate it. So as far as a facilities vehicle, I don't think so. We've been using a golf cart, and Chris is here as well. He can probably speak to this even better, but we have been using a golf cart because that's what we have in order to do it. And you can't tear your fields up with all those bigger tools, bigger cars. Yeah, Chris, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think when we call it a Polaris, it maybe makes it sound like a fun snowmobile or something like that. We have currently a golf cart. It's a gas machine. It's leaking. It's potentially on its last legs. As soon as that thing goes, we will no longer be able to maintain our baseball field meaningfully. And that's not the only purpose served by this vehicle. And so, yes, $10,000 it seems like a lot of money, and maybe calling it Polaris not the right branding for what is really a device used by our facilities department as well as our athletic department to necessarily provide transit across the large campus, and ultimately to do facilities work you know, when our team takes the field, we want them to take the field to the same standard as the other teams that we play against, and having that available to us is essential for that purpose. Now, would we like it if we can get some local support in the form of donation or a deal or something, absolutely. I think we're all interested in doing that.
Would it be the case that if like a student gets injured or concussion,
Yes,
they get transported
yes,
and that you be okay?
yes.
So anyone, just in case that wasn't on the mic, Gregory asked if no, that wasn't a chide, just for clarity. If anyone were to get injured, oh, sorry.
Yeah, we have two machines right now, essentially. We have a golf cart and we have another John Deere machine that, together, those two vehicles are used by our athletic director, our facilities department, our athletic trainer. And yes, like one of those two vehicles is used for, only the golf cart right now is used to drive the field and to prepare. The John Deere machine is usually used for our athletic trainer. Sometimes they sort of shift and move them. There's a third vehicle that you'll see on campus that's technically owned by a baseball or Coastal Football League. So just again, people to know in case they're watching this, wondering about different things they see driving on our campus. But yes, as soon as that golf cart dies, we're not going to have tools we need, and so that's why that's one.
Thank you, Chris. Frank.
So just to go back a little bit to your very first beginning when you were talking about positions, and if we go to just an MOE budget, that is at 5.08, is that
5.06.
06? Thank you. So just to get to that would be pretty devastating to the budget at this point. Is that correct? 642?
Yeah.
That's a pretty heavy hit, is it not?
Yeah, that's definitely several, if not more positions, because to get to 353,000, the items that I listed are not attached to positions, they're operational items.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I guess I would just add to, again, the thought experiment component of this, the consideration component. Our fiscal year goal does say with minimal impact to the local contribution, and we have 3 towns looking at a 10 to 12% increase. And I think that may be the minimal possible. I think it's hard to call that minimal on its face. So again, which is not to say, thus we must cut. I think thus we must consider. I think would be my point there.
But I think you're leaving out the implementation of the strategic plan is also part of the goal.
100%. But
So,
I'm not,
it's like, that's why it's like the 5-year strategic plan. So
I think we have to consider both, is all I'm saying.
the same sentence, implementing the strategic plan with minimal impact to local contribution. So it's either a 5-year strategic plan or 15-year strategic plan.
Yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing. I just think that we need to be considering options to make sure that we're just determining the correct choice, I guess, is all I mean.
We will, this week, we will go. Sorry.
These mics,
Thank you, Bill.
the tough night for mics.
So we take your request very seriously, and we will take a look at that this week, and we'll be prepared next week to give you some options and some solutions. And the way I've been managing it is meeting with my administrators, talking these things through, meeting individually with different people, running ideas by them. Again, we know that we need to be fiscally responsible, and we know that that's a high increase. We don't want to cut positions, but we also want to be responsible to the taxpayers. And we'll come up with we have some ideas, we've come up with some, and we'll continue to talk about those and bring another proposal forward to see what you think. We'll give you scenarios again and what that will look like.
That sounds very useful. Thank you.
Can I correct something you said? You called it a high increase, and I just want to reject the rhetoric that a 6.11% budget is a high increase. I think I'm being playful with you, Heidi, but I am serious what I'm saying. it can both be true that the existing budget proposal of 6.11 is appropriate. This is a personnel-driven enterprise. This district made commitments over the past couple of years that we were going to invest in our staff so that we were retaining exceptional teachers. And by my eye, we are doing a great job at that, and it comes at a cost. So that can be true, and we can be faced with the unenviable position that due to all the dynamics here and what we might argue is the insufficiency of the funding that's coming from the state government, that the increases to towns is also unsustainably high. Like both of those, I'm just pointing out what we all know. I'm not making any grand points here. And so I think the responsible act of stewardship is to take a look at it again. And Heidi and Evan, it sounds like you're already doing that. And, and it looks like we can get under the hood with you next week.
I think that's a very good way of phrasing it, Kim, and I agree wholeheartedly with that point. I have some probably outdated information because every district's budget is in flux right now. But our proposed increase is below a lot of our peers. Brunswick had proposed to 7.68, RSU 5 had proposed to 6.53, and MSAD 11 had proposed to 9.57. None of those are final. I'm sure those numbers are coming down. But to your point, and I think this goes to what Gregory was pointing out as well, right? 6.11 is a reasonable increase, given our priorities, given our work. The unenviable part of it is our average local share is 9.36, which is higher than a lot of our neighboring districts because of the funding formula and the way it works out. So that balances differently for us than it does for other districts. Doesn't mean 6.11 is wrong, but it does mean we need to consider and look at it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Bowdoin's at almost 12%. That's just wrong. And again, I still hold the same position that 6.1 seems pretty darn reasonable to me too. Not a fun position to be in.
I feel like the conversation's winding down. If I'm misunderstanding that, that's great. But it feels like we've sort of set our pieces and are all in mulling it over mode. Are there any more questions we'd like answers to? Any more comments we'd like to make? Any more discussion amongst each other we would like to have? No wrong answers, I promise. So it seems like we know what we want to hear next week, and I think we'll all come prepared to really dig in and feel comfortable. The idea would be a week from today, plus a half hour, we would be in a position to recommend a budget to the full board that would show up in April. I don't have the calendar in front of me, but it's our April meeting, April 9th. Thank you, Kim. So that budget would get heard at 6 o'clock. And then our normal meeting would start at 6:30. And one of the items of new business within our 6:30 meeting would be to adopt the budget as the board, which will then carry it forward to the meeting at the Orion in May. So this committee will be tasked with that decision to recommend a budget to the board. That is our charge next week. We are also charged with a recommendation of opened or closed articles. As a reminder, a closed article can only be decreased. An open article can be decreased or increased at the district budget meeting at the Orion. Historically, we do closed articles. There was one year we did open articles. Maybe there have been a couple of years, but recently, I know Frank's a proponent of the open article. He likes it. But that's a conversation we can have in a week. We don't have to worry about it now, but it's just a reminder that's what the committee's work really is determining a budget to recommend, determining a recommendation on warrant articles, and then from there, the full board takes it. Any questions about that? All right, with that, I will look to public comments, if there is any. We've heard from our principal. I assume you're good at this point. Any comment here? Listen, Mike. Well, this way people at home can hear. There you go.
Hello, Chris Eichhorn from Bodenham. Just a quick question about land usage. How much acreage does the school, does SAD75 have? And that's unused and could be possibly used for revenue by maybe leasing it out? There's a lot of solar companies and things like that. I don't know if this has already been looked at. I'm sure it probably has. I'm not that smart, but
Y'all heard that sound.
So the solar information, yes, we've already done that. That in looking at budgets over the last couple of years, I researched to figure out what schools can use in order to generate revenue. And there's very, very few things, but solar initiatives was one of them. And so we're having solar panels. We have solar panels on this school because it was built that way. We are putting them in Harpswell, and we are also putting them in Bowdoin, which on the roofs. And then if anything happens where we build a new school, those can be moved to the new school building. The other part of that to generate revenue is enrollment, and that's why we opened new pre-K programs. We had 40 new students that we had, which helped our enrollment and our subsidy as well. There are very, very few ways that school districts can generate revenue, but those were two of the ways that we were able to right away get that in there. And Evan, as far as leasing land, I don't know exactly what that would look like. I've thought about that myself, but we do have some land, but I'm not sure that we have enough land.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look through our audit document right now to see if in our fixed asset area, if it outlines that. So I don't have that right here in front of me, but I am trying to look through the table of contents quickly.
And maybe that's something we could report out next week as
Yeah.
well, as opposed to flipping if you're.
that's fine. It's just something I'm putting out there.
Yeah.
Like, feelers. Is this something we can do that?
Well, the reality is that if we did consolidate schools and we had an open school, there's an option for when so for example, if Williams Cone School was going to close because we built one school between Williams Cone and Woodside, that land then becomes an opportunity to has to go back to see if the town wants to take it, to purchase it. But then if they don't, then it can be out for bid, and that money would be raised to go back into the school budget against the bonds, I guess, with school buildings.
And to be clear, none of those decisions are part of this budget process.
Yeah, there's been no decisions made, but that's just researching and exploring opportunities.
Your hypothetical.
Hypothetical, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all for coming out again. Thank you, Heidi and Evan, for a lot of information. Again, really just the capstone of a really well-presented, well-informed process. So one more, Finance Committee, I would also say, I think we should have a debrief meeting later in the spring after we're through it all. So I will probably reach out to you guys, see what date that is available. And that may or may not allow us to hear the second, a new audit, depending on what their timeline is. That may be further out, that may be in the next year's committee, but just putting out there that is a possibility. So more to come for that schedule, but that's one more meeting for us, and then off we go.